October. Hard to believe, especially after the last 7 months, as slow as things have gone, but we finally reached what I believe is the most beautiful month in the calendar year across the entire Northern Hemisphere. My name is John Hall Jr. I'm very pleased and excited to speak to you today. Little different departure from our normal Alaska seminars. Today we're going to focus a bit more on the advantages of small group travel, something we've actually been working towards for a number of years, where we used to, of course, have a capacity of 42 to 44 on our tours years ago. In recent years, we've reduced numbers on some of our more adventure-based programs and winter tours to 28. And in 2021 and the foreseeable future, we're looking at a number of 24, which I think will only heighten and increase the experiences and the destinations and other opportunities available to you as possible visitors to Alaska. I want to thank all of you who have suffered through these before with John Sr. and myself. I know John Sr. is here watching, so I got to really be on point today. Yeah, again, thank you very much for taking the time and the continued interest in our destination. One other thing I want to mention, my wonderful bride, Lauren, is on with us today. She's going to be moderating the event. We could call her Chris Wallace after the other night, but maybe she can control this one a little bit better. So this Zoom platform's new. Lauren always had to remind me. She said, "John, did you zip up your zipper? Did you put black socks on? Do you have a belt?" Well, the good thing is I don't have to worry about any of that because you can only see me from here up today. But Lauren's going to moderate. I do encourage you to ask questions on the chat feature throughout the program. She's going to be able to respond to you with those questions. The other thing I'm certainly going to encourage you to do is to take some time, if you haven't already, and visit our website, kissalaska.com. There's a ton of information on there regarding the 2021 tours, our partners at sea on the cruise lines. There's a lot of great information on there. And then for those that love the video aspect, YouTube, I would encourage you to visit our YouTube page so you can see some of the fantastic destinations and get a better, I guess, idea of the guest experience that they're having in places like Kodiak or Katmai or the northern reaches of Kaktovik and Barrow along the way. The 2021 catalog is currently at press. That should be available very, very soon. But in the meantime, like I say, the website and the YouTube options are great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get started with the slide program. So for those of you that don't know us personally or haven't had a chance to attend one of our seminars, one of the things that I encourage everybody to do, even if you have been to Alaska with us or have been to one of these programs, is spend some time and do your research on Alaska. Anytime you're selecting a partner, and really that goes beyond Alaska, anytime you're traveling anywhere across the globe, you want to really know who you're traveling with. We're very blessed. We're very fortunate to have been awarded a number of significant awards in the travel industry, and of course had a number of media organizations that have recognized us as well. That's all great, but for some reason my computer was lagging there, and those are all wonderful. You know, this for us marks we're going on 37 years of visiting Alaska, and these are all wonderful, but one of the things I, again, always encourage people to do is talk to the people who have been there and done it, the ones that have the t-shirts, because this is what John Hall's Alaska is really about. Numbers are great, the bottom line's important, but the pillars of our organization are customer service and really the guest experience in Alaska. And that fellowship and the friendships that are formed as you travel throughout the state, that's very important to us. Much like the Zoom today, we've got people from Texas and Arizona and Florida and Minnesota, and we even let a few Packer fans in. You know, we got to be fair to everybody, but we love to see those relationships spawn, and I really encourage you to take time, if you don't know someone already, to reach out and find someone or do some deep search on the reviews on our organization. When people ask me, who are you? Who is John Halls Alaska? Well, and I say, well, we're a lot of things. We're people like Matt Lowe, a gentleman who's lived in Alaska for over 40 years. I think he would give up his firstborn son before he would ever consider moving away from the state of Alaska. The guy has a true passion for the state, and as you can see, a bit of a passion for the outdoors. We're people like Gwendolyn Brazier and Mark Levette, people who love the state so much that they sacrifice time with their friends or their family during the summer months so that they can bless our travelers with the experiences and personal lifetime achievements and time and love that they have for the state as they tour around from places like Anchorage, Denali, Fairbanks, and of course, Valdez and beyond. I would say, as much as anything, though, we are a major part of our fabric is our partnerships in Alaska. People like Dave Munson, who you see pictured here, with the late, great dog mushing champion, Susan Butcher, the 4-time Iditarod champion. Partnerships like we have with Dave, which is pretty amazing, allows us to take our groups of travelers into his home and really get a chance to look behind the curtain at what it takes to run a dog mushing operation, a kennel in Alaska. And the love, of course, that goes into those animals, and having that hands-on experience, that emotional connection to Alaska is something that we hope everybody comes home with. And I think it's a very vital part of our fabric, of our DNA in the state. Culture and wildlife is equally important to any guest experience. We're very rich in our culture in Alaska. We have 5 tribal regions and then 13 sub-tribes in the state. And you get a chance to learn all about the Haida, Tlingit, and Athabascans and beyond as you travel into the farther reaches. And I would say we're also outdoor enthusiasts. I'm actually talking to you today from Texas because I married a Texas girl. Had I not met Lauren, I probably would still be living in Alaska year-round. It's just an awesome place to be, and we love really every aspect of it, other than when we have to close down operations for the fall and wait till our visitors return in the winter. And that's another thing. We're really a year-round tour operator for the most part, when you consider that we have trips starting in May and running through into September, and who knows in the future, maybe even longer. And then, of course, we have some winter programs that highlight the Aurora and the Iditarod and all the fun adventures that can be had during the winter months in Alaska. And I'm sure some of you who are in Minnesota and Wisconsin can't imagine fun in the winter when it's 20, 30, 40 below, but Alaska winters are different, and they're fantastic. And you see that obviously in the smiles of people's faces. If you come across residents in Alaska, operators, restaurateurs, they'll tell you that John Halls Alaska, yeah, they're the Blue Jackets. Their people are always happy. They're always having a good time. Like I say, the level of fellowship is really very different from other operators, and those Blue Jackets certainly stick out. But that's certainly a good part of who we are, the Blue Jackets in Alaska. And of course, if you notice here in the background, that's one of our year-round Alaska residents. That's a brown bear outside of Kodiak, Alaska, that these guests are viewing. And all of this, of course, is possible. These dreams, these ideas were put into motion by my father, John Hall Sr., pictured there between Joseph and I. Joseph is the second child. He is in charge of all of our motor coach maintenance, oversees all of the DOT, the important stuff that allows a tour operator to be a tour operator. And then Elizabeth, on the far left side of the picture, she, of course, is my baby sister, but also oversees all of our operations in Alaska and in our home office in Minnesota. But what we were all blessed to do was to take forward the foundation, the pillars that I talked about that John Sr. had come up with many years ago. When John Sr. started in the tourism industry in the early 80s, he was visiting destinations like Arizona and Florida and Branson, Missouri, and Nova Scotia. In 1984, he made his first trip to Alaska as a tour operator. but his love of Alaska was firmly in place many years prior to that, because in 1955, our grandfather took my dad at the age of 11, and they transported 500 cases of eggs from Foley, Minnesota, up to Fairbanks, Alaska. Of course, before the building of the Alakan Highway, the idea of fresh eggs and fresh produce in Alaska really wasn't an option. So those 500 cases of eggs made their way for Piggly Wiggly grocers up to Fairbanks, Alaska. John Sr. tells the story that, of course, they didn't break a single egg on that trip, but they blew 12 tires. So we always joke about that. It's amazing what you remember as a 10 or 12-year-old boy or girl traveling in Alaska. But that passion was, and that love for Alaska was certainly lit many years before John Hall's Alaska came into existence. But since 1999 into the 2000 travel season, Alaska has been our sole focus. And there's a book that sits on John Sr.'s shelf at home called Good to Great. And really the meaning of that, the bottom line of that book, to sum it up, is why do 10 or 12 things at a good level if you can do one thing at a great level? And that's exactly what he wanted to do with Alaska. There were three things that John Sr. knew visitors wanted to see more than anything else. And it started with the glaciers. Of course, we have the Tidewater glaciers that you see here. These are the ones that the cruise ships will put you in front of. The day boats in places like Prince William Sound and Kenai Fjords we'll talk about here in a little bit. And we'll watch those glaciers, of course, calve and slam into the water. And the concussion that creates is just amazing. And I know some of you experience that, and it really literally does make the hair on the back of your neck stand up when you see that. The second thing, of course, that people always hope to see is the wildlife. For me, this is number one on my list. Again, outdoor enthusiast. I love to hike and hunt and fish. And even today, if there's a moose on the side of the road, I tend to slow down, stop, and take pictures. And that philosophy, again, was something that John Sr. started many years ago when we started running these Alaska tours full time. He said, we're not going to put people on a schedule. He said, if we see a mother bear and her cubs on the side of the road, we're going to slow down, we're going to stop, we're going to take pictures. We might be there for 20 or 30 or 40 minutes. We might not get to our destination until 1:30 for lunch, or we might not get to our hotel until 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the evening. Point being that when you're going to Alaska, this is what you are going to see. Hopefully you're not rushing to your hotel room to see the 5 o'clock news. And again, these experiences can be controlled so much better when you're traveling with a smaller group. If we were 3 or 4 or 5 buses caravanning together, traveling with 400 or 500 passengers, like some of the larger operators do, we wouldn't have that ability to pull over and have these kind of encounters and spend the time. I think just the commotion alone would scare them off, but that's very much an important part of who we are in a day-to-day operation. And then, of course, next to the glaciers and the wildlife, the mountains and the scenery are one of the greatest and the third draw to Alaska. Of course, pictured here is Denali, the highest point in all of North America. Kind of a fun fact about Denali, this picture is taken from the back country. We're about 35 miles from the base of the mountain at this point. We're out near the Kantishna region and Wonder Lake inside Denali. We'll talk more about Denali later, but the Tourism Bureau, or the tourism industry somewhere in there in Alaska, coined a phrase years ago that said, if you saw the mountain, you were in the 30% club. The mountain is so large, it can produce its own weather patterns. So there are certainly days and weeks that go by where visitors won't see the top of that mountain. We're very, very blessed to see a number almost 3 times that in terms of sightings for our guests in Alaska. But part of that is not just because God is opening the curtains and allowing our guests to show the beauty and all of this massive rock, but really it's the fact that we're spending the time necessary in places like Denali and in Kantishna and in Talkeetna, so that we're spending 2, 3, 4, 5 days on each of these different itineraries that we offer, putting you in a position to have the opportunity to catch the summit of that 20,310-foot mountain, which, again, fun fact, is actually the highest vertical summit, base to summit of any of the mountains in the world. Mount Everest, of course, is known as the tallest point in all the world, but it sits on about an 8,000 foot plateau and climbs to its 29,000 foot peak, where this mountain literally goes from sea level to its summit quicker than any mountain in the world. Of course, for many years, Alaska has been known as a cruise destination. We were there before the cruise industry kind of took a foothold on Alaska, and hopefully we're going to be there for many years to come after. But when we started the programs in 1984, John Sr. was driving the coaches up from Minnesota through the Canadian Rockies, through the interior of Alaska, and then we're actually putting the coaches and the clients on the ferry system and taking them down through the Inside Passage to see Skagway and Juneau and Sitka and some of the other fabulous destinations in Southeast Alaska. And it allowed, of course, guests to spend more time in those destinations. We spent a night or two in each of those places, and then we disembarked the coach and end up coming back across from Prince Rupert, back across the western United States into Minnesota. Of course, with the demand for cruising increasing in the late 80s into the 90s, we started relationships with cruise lines like Holland America, Princess, Celebrity, Royal Caribbean. We still have those relationships today, but one of the things we're most thankful for in this era of COVID and the idea that small group travel is more important than ever, keeping those pods safe and keeping each other healthy. We have to remember that we're a land tour operator first, and we always have been. The interior of Alaska is our specialty. Places like Anchorage, Denali, Fairbanks, but then of course those places off the beaten path like McCarthy and Kennecott and Barrow and Kaktovik, and we'll talk more about some of those destinations in a moment. But again, as we've worked in towards 2021 and a new approach to travel and some smaller groups yet, again, it wasn't a huge change for us. When these motor coaches are built by MCI Corporation, a typical motor coach, like I'm sure many of you have been on at some point or another, generally is configured with 55 to 57 seats. They're 45-foot motor coaches, of course, the driver's seat up front, and then in the back is a laboratory. When ours are built, they're custom built to specifications that Joseph and John Sr. have worked through for years. Very, very comfortable. We actually limit the number of seats on board to 44, allowing for all the seats to be stretched out, separated so that you've got a little bit more leg room in between rows. And of course, as we move into 2021, we're not going to be using, again, all 42 or 44 of those seats. We're going to be in a position where that motor coach is running and operating about half full so that we can stagger people every other seat and leave seats open as we move forward, just to allow for that safe social distancing. And again, with the idea of the safety programs with small groups, much easier again to control that environment. We've already made capital investments in the motor coaches, such as new filter systems, antimicrobial filter systems in the coaches. And then of course, that also flows through the fresh air system coming in the overhead blowers on the coach. We've always taken a very serious approach to those motor coaches, of course, in terms of the cleanliness of them. When your name is on the side of that motor coach, as it is for John Sr., people know who you are. And if you have a dirty coach traveling through Anchorage on a busy day, or through Denali on a day that there's 25,000 visitors in town, it can be embarrassing if that coach isn't clean. So cleanliness has always been important, but we're, again, fortifying those approaches and even extending some cleaning opportunities where when guests get off to have lunch, we're going to do a sanitation process of the coach, a wipe down of all the touch points. When we load and unload the coach, we're going to make sure that it's loaded back to front and unloaded front to back, so that we're minimizing the amount of time that guests are passing one another or touching, again, those areas, those hot points. Each night, the motor coach will be fogged with a special machine that kills the bacteria and viruses that could be on board the coach. And then in between each tour, we're going to be doing a more extensive cleaning. The motor coaches will actually be taken out of operation for 48 hours in between tours, so that they can be really detailed and cleaned, and again, provide a fresh, safe start for each group that's coming into Alaska. Of course, we all pray and dream that we're going to be on the other side of this sooner than later. But of course, we have to prepare with the idea that, yeah, there might be a vaccine, but we still want to make sure that we're not allowing any of our clients to get sick, and then of course pass it on to the Alaska residents or our staff, and vice versa. We want to make sure that we're keeping you safe as well. And so with that in mind, for the time being, some of the questions that we know have come up is, what about masks? Yes, there are mandates in public areas in Alaska, and I don't know how long that's going to continue. Right now, we're planning to, of course, make sure everybody has masks when they come. We will be supplying masks as well as hand sanitizer and wipes. But when you're boarding and unboarding the motor coach, disembarking the coach, we ask that you just put that mask on while you walk by. While you're traveling on the coach, you're not going to have to wear that for the entirety of the day or throughout the entire tour, just in certain areas. And again, we'll see where those restrictions go as we move forward. But for now, it's still a plan in terms of our safety plan for 2021. Now, if you've looked at maps, and I love maps. One of the things I miss about this platform of Zoom is that I don't get to set up my travel show and have all my maps and books and show you some of the places and some of the books that I love most on Alaska, and really get in deep to the maps. But one of the things you'll notice while you're doing your research on Alaska, and if you haven't already, very limited number of highways in Alaska. Honestly, there's only 12 roadways. So if you're ever thinking about driving your RV to Alaska, don't worry, you can't get lost. You'll end up in a place like Valdez. You got to turn around and go back the other way. When you get to Fairbanks, Alaska, you have 3 options. You can go south to Denali. You could turn around and go south on the Richardson Highway back to Valdez, or you could take the state highway that's not all that well kept up, which is of course the Dalton Highway that goes to Prudhoe Bay. Not that I would encourage you to take private vehicles on that road, pretty restricted. But one of the things that I wanted to really make an example of in this particular slide was, the motor coaches are great and they give us access to a lot of Alaska, but to do what we want to do as a whole and to really exemplify how important and what a great advantage it is to travel in small groups, we have to look at really the rest of the state that opens up to us, and those means of transportation to get there, whether it be by boat or rail or of course airplane. I think you've probably heard us say over the years we cover 2/3 more of Alaska than the typical tour company. And this map is a great representation of that. Oftentimes when you look at itineraries or maps that the cruise lines put out, of course it highlights the Inside Passage, Juneau, Skagway, Ketchikan, the glaciers, and then maybe in the interior it will highlight places like Anchorage, Denali, and Fairbanks. The city of Juneau gets the most in terms of number of visitors every year. They eclipse annually right about 1.1 to 1.2 million. We'll get about 1.7 in the entire state each summer. Now, 2020 was certainly a little different, but looking ahead, those numbers, they could drop a little bit in 2021, but those have been pretty consistent numbers for years. Places like Denali National Park. Denali will get almost 500,000 visitors from the 10th of May until about the 15th of September. And Denali's great, and we're going to talk about its amazing wildlife and of course the mountain more in a bit. But these places that you see on the red lines and some of the other destinations that we highlight, one of our partners in Alaska, he once said, John Hall's Alaska likes to take people, the visitors that come up with them, to destinations that the Alaska residents take their family and friends to visit. Places that are oftentimes missed by the big tour operators. And it's not that they wouldn't love to go to places like Kaktovik or Kantishna or to an Iditarod checkpoint or to Katmai National Park. The reality is, again, when your goal is to fill a cruise ship that has 2,000 passengers and you're running land tours alongside that, you can't move 500 to 1,000 people around at a time into places like that. So again, it just really reaffirms the blessing that we have to work with this number of 24 and to open up more of the state so that we can have more of these incredible encounters and experiences. And it's a small group and like I say, big experiences. This is one of our photos that was taken a couple years ago. I actually traveled with this group during our Iditarod adventure in 2019. And this was one of the checkpoints. This is about mile 400 on that Iditarod trail. About 7 or 8 days into the itinerary, after we've watched the ceremonial start and the official start down in Anchorage and Willow, we will actually fly from Fairbanks, Alaska in small aircraft, 8-10 passenger aircraft, and we'll fly out to a checkpoint like McGrath, where you get a chance to see these mushers, these men and women and their dog teams. And it's pretty amazing, because when you see them in Anchorage, they look great, they've slept, they smell fine. When you see them in places like McGrath, their eyes are bigger than saucers, and they probably haven't slept more than about 25 minutes a day in a 24-hour cycle on their route to, of course, Nome, Alaska. And I think a lot of them, by the time they get to McGrath, are questioning, am I really cut to do this? And I'll tell you that there's two things I learned long ago that I will not do in Alaska. One is climb Denali, and the other is run this race. It really takes its toll on the person's mind and body when you're running across darkness and you've got 40, 50, 60 below wind chill as the wind blows off the Norton Sound. So it's pretty awesome to get a chance to talk to those mushers, and you do. We got a chance to actually see Lance Mackey when we were in McGrath on this particular itinerary, and Lance was a 4-time winner of the Iditarod, and to see him prepare his dog team, or I guess to allow them to rest, take them off their harnesses, put down the beds for them, take off the booties, massage them, and that's all stuff that has to be done by the musher himself. They don't have a team of vets or experienced handlers there to help them with that. That's all done by the mushers. So again, that's just one of my favorite features of the winter tour, is to fly out and see those mushers on the trail. Alaska itself, again, many of you probably heard this from us before, has more coastline than the entire lower 48. If we combine the Atlantic, Gulf, and Pacific coast together, it wouldn't consist of the same amount of coastline that Alaska has. So as important as our motor coaches are to visiting places like Denali and Fairbanks, getting into these small boats and taking people into the waterways of Alaska so that they can visit some of these incredible ecosystems like Prince William Sound and see the coastal ranges and the wildlife, that's equally as important. Now, if small day boats are still too big for you, we do have itineraries that take people on river floats. This is our fish and float trip, where guests go to Homer and spend some time, as well as the Kenai Peninsula and Alyeska. And you can see these. This is the Kenai River, beautiful emerald water as you float down the Kenai River on an afternoon or morning float before we head on into to Homer. So water is important. The state of Alaska has just a few more rivers and a few more lakes than the great state of Minnesota. I know Minnesota claims to be the land of lakes, but Alaska has lakes, so truly the land of lakes, and 3,000 rivers. So again, waterways are very important. But going back to these day boats that go into places like Kenai Fjords National Park. Kenai Fjords is in south central Alaska. If you're looking at maps, if you find Seward, you'll find Kenai Fjords. It's just south of Anchorage, Alaska, about 120 miles. Beautiful national park here. These day boats will take us in to see the whales, of course, humpbacks and orcas and minke whales. Very, very rich wildlife area is Kenai Fjords. But of course, it still has the tidewater glaciers. Valdez is one of the destinations that these small boats will take us to. Now, this particular destination, Valdez, one of my favorite cities in all of Alaska, oftentimes referred to as the little Switzerland of Alaska. You see the rough, rugged peaks around the bay, surrounded by 26 different glaciers in the valleys. We call those hanging glaciers. And Valdez is really our gateway to Prince William Sound. And again, Prince William Sound, one of the richest ecosystems in North America. Beautiful cruising, almost like the true inside passage cruising, where you're ducking between these islands. So guests don't have to worry about rough water, fairly calm seas, and again, small group advantage to be able to kind of manage that boat. It's dedicated to our group, and we can manage that boat as we see fit throughout the day. What the guests are looking at here is actually in a hatchery for salmon. So you learn all about that salmon cycle and get a chance to possibly see some longliners or dip netters that are that are setting nets in Prince William Sound as well, catching those salmon in July, August, and into September for the silver salmon. Again, very wildlife abundant, whether it's the sea lions, the sea otters, the puffins, the otters, my favorite here. You see them float around. They've got a rock that they call their favorite rock. They keep that handy, and they dive down to grab a mussel or a clam or oyster. They use that rock to crack that shell open and have breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The thing that I would say about Prince William Sound, it is, in my personal experience and opinion, the best glacier encounter that you can have in Alaska. Tracy Arm and Glacier Bay are fabulous in Southeast Alaska. Kenai Fjords has some great glaciers as well. But coming out of Valdez with Stan Stevens or the Lulubelle, we have an opportunity to visit two of the more active glaciers in Alaska, the Mears Glacier or the Columbia Glacier. And weather will oftentimes dictate, and of course wind with ice pack will dictate which one we'll get a chance to get up close to. And oftentimes these vessels will allow our guests to get within about a quarter mile of the face of that glacier. And again, you talk about just a hair-raising experience and something that'll shake your innards is when that glacier calves, that white thunder that the natives refer to, and that ice breaks and crushes into the water below. And the wave that's created, the aftershock from that is really impressive. It's a very, very powerful experience, and one that I think Prince William Sound has the opportunity to provide, as well as any place across the state of Alaska. One of my other favorite destinations, and again, set up really for small group travel, is in Cordova. This is the Orca Adventure Lodge in southeastern portion of Prince William Sound. Is the old fishing village of Cordova. Cordova sits right at the mouth of the Copper River Delta. And of course, this was actually at one time, before it was an adventure lodge, this was a cannery for the fishing industry. But imagine waking up here in the morning and having a pod of orcas swim by, and that salty smell of the sea air as you wake up. And one of the neat things about Cordova that we've incorporated, as with destinations like Kantishna and Denali, is that while our guests are here, they're given a chance to kind of create their own day of adventure. And with these activities and attractions, they get to choose from fishing. Of course, in June, July, we have the red salmon making their run, maybe some kings as well. As you get into August, it becomes the silver salmon, which tends to be my family's favorite fish to catch and also to dine on. Just seems to be the right amount of oil and fat with those silver salmon, but you might catch halibut, rockfish, yellow eye. There's some great opportunities there. If you're not a fisher person, maybe you want to take a guided hike or a kayak trip to the Sheridan Glacier. Here you see the kayak going out to the glacier, and of course here's the hike that takes you out to the glacier. And then they have a photo safari as well. So you get some nice options to choose from when you visit a place like Cordova on our untamed Alaska. Now, probably the most important means of transportation to really opening up the state to us is the airline industry. They say in Alaska that 50% of the state flies with a pilot's license, and the other 50% just flies without one. Of course, we're doing our due diligence, and we know who we're flying with when we're visiting Alaska. These regional carriers like Raven or Era, they take us to places like Barrow and Kaktovik, to the far reaches, Kodiak, a little further distance of flying. So these are 28 passenger Dash 8s that will take us to the far reaches of the state, so that you can, again, get that cultural experience. This is Barrow, the northernmost point in North America. Of course, not too hard to tell that it's a native village there with the whale bones and the boats that they have. But one of the great experiences that I think people have when they go to a village like Barrow, you step off that plane, and if you're lucky, you get a chance to see the natives living their subsistence lifestyle. This is very much a reality today, even in 2020. They don't have the privilege of going down the street to Randall's or H-E-B or Safeway or Cars. They have one grocery store in town, and you'd be amazed at the price of their groceries. Milk that's $10 a gallon, a bag of Doritos will be $10 a bag. Cans of coffee are $20 for a Folgers coffee. But to see this, to see the seal skin rolled up there and the meat drying, or maybe it's the fish that's drying or the caribou that's drying, it really just it really puts into perspective how blessed we are to be able to sit here today and have the things that we do available to us. But also it takes you back in time a bit and gives you a real look at what true Alaska is all about. True Alaska is not about cruise ships with 5,000 people and jewelry stores where they sell gold by the inch. It's about the native people, the first people to Alaska, and the lifestyle that they still live today. The airplanes also, of course, give us opportunity to visit the Emerald Island of Kodiak. Kodiak is well known, of course, for its Kodiak brown bears, and we'll get to those, but some other real interesting and historical importance destinations or highlights in Kodiak that we get a chance to see are the Russian churches. We get a chance to learn about the Russian Orthodox that came into Alaska. Of course, Alaska, the U.S. purchased Alaska from Russia. So still a lot of that Russian influence in places like Kodiak and Southeast Alaska, like Sitka, but also the military history. Not a lot of people know that Alaska was on the front line in World War II. This was Fort Abercrombie. We'll get a chance to visit Fort Abercrombie. Shots were never fired from this fort, but the military was certainly ready. We did have battles on the Aleutian Islands, way out on the Aleutian Islands in Kiska and Attu, where Japanese and American soldiers gave their lives for that war. While in Kodiak, one of the highlights that we'll have, and here another introduction to a different type of aircraft, are our Alaska bush planes. And this is a de Havilland Beaver, and it'll take off with, of course, one pilot and then generally 4 to 5 clients, and we'll fly out to remote parts of the Katmai coast where you get a chance to, of course, walk on the shores, almost hand in hand with these beautiful brown bears. Now, I know this seems crazy. It might make you shy away from such a tour, but we've been running this 3 Bears of Alaska tour and trips to Kodiak for about 6 years now. And those that have done it will tell you, and John Senior's done it a few times, it's the most amazing bear or maybe wildlife encounter experience you can have in Alaska. We're going to talk about a couple other bear viewing opportunities in just a moment, but what you see here is these bears in their natural environment. And they really could care less that these 11 or 12 people are standing there watching them. Their focus is on the salmon. They need to feed on that salmon and really fatten up and prepare for the winter that's in front of them. And these guides that are with us, they see these bears on a daily basis. They have names for these bears. It's really much safer than one would imagine when you see photos like this. Probably the most recognizable bear viewing destination in Alaska is Brooks Falls in Katmai National Park. Again, we're limited here with the number of people that we can bring into Brooks Falls on a daily basis. So that group number of 24 fits this destination fine. We've been running groups of 28 in here for the last close to 10 years on our national park tour. You get a chance to see those bears catching those salmon as they jump up the beautiful waterfalls there at Brooks. While you're on the trails to and from the waterfall, where most of the people spend their time on the platforms, we'll be here for about 6 hours in total at the park. You never know what kind of encounter you might have. Of course, there are rangers, park rangers all over, and you'll go through a bear safety class, bear school before things get started. But this particular bear just decided she was going to take a nap right in the middle of the path. And you can see the feet in the background of that picture. Matt actually took this picture in the foreground. So, our group was separated for a while, but for good reason. That bear has the right of way, and they let her take her nap and rub her belly, and then she moved on, and we got to enjoy the rest of the day there in Katmai. So pretty awesome encounter. I think one of the most fascinating encounters that one can have with bears in Alaska, and again, it's thanks to the airline industry that we can do this, is on the very north slope. It would be east of Barrow, Alaska, if you're looking at your map, and that's Kaktovik. Kaktovik, Alaska, in the fall months is home to about 80 polar bears. And the reason they come in here off the ice pack is because of the large number of seals that live in the Kaktovik region. But also, right around the very 1st of September, Kaktovik, as a native village, is allowed to harvest 3 bowhead whales. And when that bowhead whaling season starts, these bears know it, they can smell it, they can hear it, and they start to come in a little bit closer and closer to the village each day. And of course, if one of those whales is harvested, then the bears will actually come right into the village themselves. And it's kind of interesting to see how the residents of Kaktovik manage that. The first time I went to Kaktovik, I had a National Geographic day. We walked off our plane. Our guide said to us, "You're here on a pretty special day." And I said to him, "Why? Are there polar bears? What do we have to expect here?" And he said, "No." He said, "The village just harvested its 3rd and final bowhead whale." And suddenly this went from a bear viewing expedition to truly a National Geographic moment. I've said for years that Air Force One could have landed on that airstrip. Jesus could have walked across the inlet and nobody would have cared. That village was so focused on the celebration of that animal and how important it meant to each of those families, the harvest of that whale. And we were lucky to participate in that. I got a chance to try whale for my first time. It was actually not bad. I didn't try the muktuk, the whale fat. Our guide said, "No, that's not for you white guys." He said, "That's for us." But it's quite a place, Kaktovik in itself. It's quite a destination, and a chance to see those polar bears exists on our 3 Bears of Alaska trip when we fly up there the first part of September. Other destinations that I want to highlight that really only accessible by airplane, Wrangell St. Elias National Park. And we'll talk more about the national parks in a moment here, but Wrangell St. Elias is the largest of the national parks in the U.S. park system, about 13.2 million acres. Denali gets about 500,000 visitors every year. This park only sees about 60,000, and it's simply because of where it's located. It's about 180 miles to the east of Anchorage, Alaska. So it's off that rail belt that runs from Fairbanks to Denali to Anchorage and down to Seward. So again, a lot of operators neglect this area because it doesn't fit the idea of time that allows that they allow when they think about constructing Alaska itineraries. Not only is Wrangell St. Elias the largest, it's probably one of the more historic national parks, certainly in Alaska. While we're here, we actually stay inside the park at the Kennecott Glacier Lodge. You walk out of your room, you've got views of the Kennecott Glacier. And then one of the neat things that we'll do while we're here in McCarthy and Kennecott is we'll visit the old historic Kennecott copper mines. This is a National Historic Landmark. The Park Service will actually take us all the way up through that mill, and you'll come down 13 levels of stairs through that mill and learn about the Kennecott Corporation and the copper that was mined during this very short-lived mining project. It only ran from about 1910 to 1912, but it was one of the richest and most highly rated copper deposits that they'd ever found. It was about a 75% pure copper grade that was pulled out of here. But because of World War II, time was limited here. They needed the men, they needed the resources elsewhere. And so the Kennecott Corporation shut this down. But still a fantastic highlight, again, on our national park program. Yes, get a chance to witness and experience that history right there. I told you we get into the national parks. Alaska is home to 8 of our nation's national parks. That's more than any state in the union. We've got everything from the biggest to probably the least visited. If I had to look at the numbers exactly, it'd be very close. But Katmai National Park at the top of my list. We talked about that already. That's the home to the bears in July. They come to chase the salmon in those falls. Wrangell St. Elias, the aforementioned largest. Beautiful national park. Gates of the Arctic will actually visit again on our national park itinerary. This is about halfway between Fairbanks and Barrow, Alaska. We'll stop there. It's home to the last of the nomadic people, last of the nomadic tribes in Alaska, and we'll visit a village called Anatuvik. Kenai Fjords, I mentioned early on, beautiful glacier-filled waterway on the south central tip of Alaska, outside of Seward. Glacier Bay is highlighted on some of our itineraries that feature small boat cruising. We'll talk about some cruising through Southeast Alaska in a little bit. Lake Clark is about 80 miles due west of Anchorage, Alaska. Kobuk Valley, this is the one that very, very few people every year get a chance to visit. I'm going to guess the total number of visitors for Kobuk Valley annually are probably around 1,100, maybe 1,200 tops. To get to Kobuk Valley, and it can be done. We've had a fair number of visitors over the last handful of years that are enthusiasts of the national parks. They want to collect the stamps, they want to walk on the ground, they want to see the national park for themselves, and we can actually coordinate for you to see all 8. But to see Kobuk, you actually fly from Anchorage to Kotzebue, Alaska, on Alaska Airlines. You'll spend the day in Kotzebue, and then while you're in Kotzebue, you'll take a small little puddle jumper, 4-person plane, and fly on over to Kobuk Valley, where you get a chance to see the great sand dunes. I know this sounds crazy, but trust me, I hope all the information I'm giving you is absolutely truthful. This is one of the great phenomenons in Alaska. Above the Arctic Circle is a desert. And every year that desert will hit almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It is the great sand dunes of the Kobuk Valley National Park. And they won't be there forever. Scientists believe that as the winds continue to change, they'll blow that sand out of Kobuk Valley. But for now, it's really an amazing sight, and really to wrap your head around the idea that above the Arctic Circle, they're getting nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So suddenly that doesn't make Central Texas sound so bad in July and August. And then, of course, there's Denali. And Denali holds a special place in, I think, all of our hearts. It's one of those places, like I said, they get 500,000 visitors a year, but they also possess the best opportunity for our visitors to get a chance to have an encounter with our animals. And when I talk about the moose and the caribou, the sheep and the bear, I've been blessed to travel across most of Alaska, and I haven't found a place yet that can come toe-to-toe with Denali. I've asked people who live in Denali, who've worked there for 40 years, what is it about this destination that keeps these animals here? Because it's not a high fence area. These animals can come and go anytime they want. They don't have to stay in Denali, but this valley that the road follows, that we'll talk about in a moment, that travels into the heart of Denali National Park, just possesses that perfect environment for these animals. The moose, of course, this is my favorite. To have an encounter with a big 60 or 70-inch bull moose will absolutely get your heart racing. And certainly we've had a few of those during our hikes in Alaska. Caribou is number 2 on that list of the big 4 in Denali. This picture is probably taken in July. You can see by the antler growth. July and August especially, we really start to see a lot of these caribou. These are the Denali caribou. They will migrate to the south side of the park come September, October. And then, of course, they migrate back up into the heart of the park in April, May, as they prepare to feed in the highlands or the mountainous regions that are snowpacked during the winter. And then, of course, the Dall sheep. And really it's because of this animal and a gentleman named Charles Sheldon that we have to thank for Denali National Park. Charles was a wealthy man, spent his fortune on studying sheep, and he had studied all the sheep in the lower 48, but he had never studied the cherished white or Dall sheep in Alaska. And when he came to Alaska in the early 1900s, what he realized is there were regions here, Denali today, that were being over-harvested. The commercial hunting industry was harvesting these animals because of their beautiful white coats, the big rams with their horns, but also their meat is very delicious meat. When it comes to wild game, Dall sheep is regarded as one of the best. So after years of failure, Charles Sheldon got together with a gentleman from Fairbanks, Alaska, Judge Wickersham, and Judge Wickersham helped to push this to Congress in the United States in Washington, D.C., and in 1916, Denali became a national park, specifically because of the work of Charles Sheldon and that animal right there, the Dall sheep. So very important to us is the Dall sheep in Alaska, and of course in Denali. And then of course for everybody, it seems like the grizzly bear is the most exciting encounter that one can have. And And I always love the emails and letters and phone calls that we get from people when they come home from Alaska, and you know, somebody, let's say Sherry from Sheboygan, she'll write an email and say, John, we had the best trip, and when we were in Denali, we saw 25 bears. And I just smile. I think that's awesome. 25 bears. I don't have the heart to email her back and tell her it was 12 bears going in and the same 12 bears coming out plus one. But that's Alaska. Again, it's not like going to the zoo. These animals come and go as they please. Especially during the fall, you'll see them. They're very, very active. They're foraging. They're eating thousands of of the blueberries every day. Those fresh blueberries that grow on the low blueberry bushes in the tundra of Alaska's subarctic, which is here at Denali National Park. So it's really awesome to watch them forage as you travel in and out of the park. And then occasionally, of course, our guests have an encounter with a wolf. Last year, well, sorry, not last year, 2020 was a complete wash, I guess, for our Alaska operations. But if we go back to 2019, 2018, and these numbers are pretty static throughout history, right around 95% of our guests will encounter bears, moose, caribou, and sheep. We've had years that 100% of our travelers have seen all of the big four. We probably get 2 to 4 groups a year that will have an encounter with a wolf. The Toklat wolf that lives here in Denali, those numbers, kind of like the lynx and the hare, they fluctuate depending on the prey and the predator. But your best opportunity again to see the wolf in Alaska is going to be in Denali National Park. And that's an absolute perfect day. If you see the moose, the sheep, the caribou, the bear, the wolf, and then you throw that big, beautiful mountain into it, I don't think you can find a destination, a wilderness destination in Alaska that can compete with a day like that. It'll leave your heart racing and your mind wandering to what's next. Now, one of the things that is unique to Denali, many of you have probably traveled to other national parks, the Great Smoky Mountains, of course, Yellowstone, where you can drive your own vehicle in and explore the destination. The Park Services in Alaska and the Federal Park Services really controls who and how you enter Denali National Park. If you look on the far right-hand portion of my map, you see there's a red line there. You see the Wilderness Access Center, the Denali National Park headquarters, also the Visitor Center. That is the park entrance. And then you'll see there's a road there that's running to the north, Fairbanks, and to the south to Anchorage. About 99% of the visitors who come to Alaska will actually spend their night or 2 nights right there at the edge of the park where that red line going east and west starts to head into the park, at the park entrance. If you want to travel into the park, you are set up on designated tours. They have the Natural History Tour, they have the Tundra Wilderness Tour, and they have the Kantishna Encounter. In order to take these trips, you will actually get on a designated bus that'll pick you up and tour you into the park. And I'll show you those buses in just a moment. What I do want you to recognize on this map, however, is that where the red line ends at the Savage River Trailhead there, that is where private vehicles are forced to turn around. They're not allowed to go any further into Denali National Park. And really from our experiences, the best wildlife viewing inside this park starts right around mile 30 at the Teklanika rest stop and runs back towards Kantishna, really to the Eielson Visitor Center, mile 66. I would say that's absolutely the best animal viewing in the entire park. And there are some tours that include trips into Denali that only go as far as 25 to 30 miles into the park. And for us, that's just, again, it's not a good experience. I don't think it provides the best opportunity available to someone who's spending the time and money to come to Alaska. And that's why we encourage, and we do, everybody who's on our tours will actually make a trip to that full distance into the park, 92 miles to Kantishna. And we'll talk more about Kantishna in just a moment. But when I talk about the park buses, these are the park sanctioned buses. In a typical year, again, this bus would have held 40 to 50 people. I think 48 is what they were configured for. Again, this summer, it's going to be private to us, so it'll be limited to just our group of 24 on the bus. Now, if you're wondering why are these park buses the only access to the park, well, that road is one way in and one way out. And when you hit regions like Sable Pass or here, Polychrome Pass, you can understand why you want to have a professional driver, and you don't want drivers, other drivers on the road with you that aren't familiar with the roadway and the signs and symbols that these drivers use to each other, because there are times where the buses are meeting each other on this road. So we got to make sure that they're not meeting each other on a corner like you see here at Polychrome. So let the professional drivers who do this on a daily basis take care of the driving, and you get to enjoy the scenery and look for all the wildlife that fills this park. When you get to the end of that road, mile 92, which will take about 5.5 to 6 hours to go the 92 miles with the bathroom breaks that we'll make along the way, and of course the wildlife viewing, stretch the legs a few times. At the end of that road, we are blessed to have a very, very special wilderness lodge. This lodge, called the Denali Backcountry Lodge, is home to many of our guests for their 2-night stay in Denali. Again, encouraging you to look at these itineraries in the catalog or on the website. We have some trips that will come here for the day, just a couple, but the vast majority of our tours will actually come and spend the 2 nights here. And again, this just fits that small group environment so perfectly. Rather than staying in a hotel that has 300 or 400 hotel rooms, I think the Princess in Denali now has in the upwards of 800 hotel rooms. Rather than staying in facilities like that where you've got your t-shirt shops and your Subway sandwiches at the Subway store, you come back here, it's a more intimate, much more personalized experience. They only invite 80 people here at a time. So our group of 24 will be just about 1/3 of the entire population that could be back here at the Backcountry Lodge. And it's again, a wonderful place to spend a couple of nights. Just really relax, stretch your legs, have that fellowship around the fire, enjoy a glass of wine or some hot tea. And again, it's more of that adventure day approach. While you're there during your full day, you've got the options of taking the guided hiking trips, go berry picking in the fall of the year, take the mountain bikes out on the road and ride up to Wonder Lake, which is about 6 miles away. You can go fishing right there in, if I flip back there, right there in Moose Creek, you can fish for grayling. Or you can take the poles, because it is a national park, you can go out to Wonder Lake and you can fish here in Wonder Lake, and you can catch lake trout. I will be honest with you, I've done a lot of fishing. I haven't done a whole lot of catching in Wonder Lake, but when your backdrop is Denali in the Alaska range, and the opportunity, and I've had this happen, where a moose comes down to get a drink of water while you're there fishing, suddenly catching doesn't matter so much. You know, it's a good day at the office, we'll call it that, when you're fishing in Wonder Lake. That's certainly it. Of course, Kantishna has a fair amount of history as well, and that's incorporated into the tours when they visit Kantishna. You'll learn about Fanny Quigley and the gold rush that took place here in 1905. There were almost 500 settlers here in Kantishna, which is, of course, now part of Denali National Park, that became part of the expansion during the preserve in 1985, when we went from the park to the preserve. But as part of that gold rush experience, of course, everybody gets a chance to pay for their Alaska trip. Boots are provided. Some people bring their own rubber boots because they just like to have them for walking and hiking through the brush in Alaska. But a chance to pan that little satchel of gold that you'll be giving out, and maybe just go ahead and find a little extra in the stream. Like I said, this was a big gold rush destination, and there certainly is gold in that river yet today. One of the things I encourage you to do with that pan is don't be shy. Work that dirt, work that gold, and let that water carry that sand and those pebbles out. One thing you always have to remember above everything else, gold is 19% heavier than anything else in that pan. You can find the biggest granite rock and put it in there. That gold's going to be heavier when you talk about the weight per ounce. So certainly get after it and have a lot of fun with the gold rush aspect and mining that gold, and get a chance to keep that gold and take it home with you. When it comes to lodging in Alaska, again, small family operated type properties is something we always try to source. Again, it fits that mold of family built operations, small group intention. We don't want to go into we never want to drop our clients in a lobby of a hotel where it's standing room only and there's a line of 45 people long to check in. Again, that's one of the advantages to John Halls Alaska is all of those check-in and check-out processes are taken in advance, taken into consideration in advance, so that when our motor coach arrives, the tour manager collects the keys, hands the keys out, and you get to start unwinding and relaxing in these beautiful destinations. Sorry, I didn't mention that particular lodge right there is the Windsong Lodge in Seward, Alaska. A favorite of our guests, I would say, is the Talkeetna Alaskan Lodge. Now, one thing I will say about these lodges, I'm not going to call them 5-star. I'm not going to say they're 4-star. I think they're very comfortable, very clean, 3-star type destinations, type hotels, accommodations. But what makes them so special is they feel Alaskan. Obviously, you walk in the lobby of this particular hotel, you got a beautiful 40-foot fireplace that goes up through the atrium and the smell of alderwood burning in there. But the view off the back deck, as you see there, Denali is only about 80 miles away at this point. And it's a total different view than we saw on the north side of the Alaska Range in Kantishna. A lot of people feel, and I might probably well be in that camp, that the south views are actually more impressive. And I'll show you a picture here in just a little bit of this mountain range lit up at night from the back porch of this back deck of this particular hotel. The Knik River Lodge, also in south central Alaska, just south of Talkeetna, individual cabins for each of the guests, a beautiful common area there overlooking the Knik River Valley, and Knik Glacier is not too far away. Again, this is right between Anchorage and Talkeetna if you're looking at your maps. One of my favorite hotels in terms of appointments and just very well thought through when they designed and built this are the Riverview rooms at the Bluffs in Denali. We have a couple groups that will spend 3 nights in Denali, like our Untamed Alaska being one of them. We'll spend 2 nights in Kantishna at the Remote Wilderness Lodge, and then they'll come and spend a night here before they move on the next day to places like Valdez. It's a good setup, but all water view rooms overlooking the Nenana River below. So again, very Alaskan. Well, we certainly could use the Marriott. We could use the Hilton in places like Anchorage and Fairbanks. But to use John Sr.'s words, why stay in a Hilton or why stay in a Marriott in Anchorage if they can stay in a Marriott in Dallas or Fort Worth or Chicago, and they're always the same? There's nothing that says Alaska about the Marriott properties. I mean, Marriott does a great job of making them having a whole high standard, a gold standard across the board. But when you go to Alaska, we want you to have that Alaska feel. So these types of accommodations certainly set that mood. And one thing I don't think I've really mentioned to this point is the value-added approach of our programs. Goal that John Sr. set forth years ago. In fact, I can remember it greatly because I was working in Alaska, started working in the operations in 2005 in Alaska. And at that point in time, we had a number of tours that lunch and dinner or breakfast and dinner was included, but maybe there was a meal or two that were not included. And we would have folks that would get off the motor coach in a place like Tok, Alaska, go into the restaurant, and they'd see that the cheeseburger or bacon cheeseburger and French fries was $15 or $14. And they'd say, well, I'd go to the diner at home and I can have a hamburger and fries for $6. Of course, part of that is Alaska and getting the goods and services up to Alaska. The price of goods, of course, certainly makes that a little bit higher. But what we saw were people were skipping meals or taking an extra yogurt off the breakfast buffet to make sure they had a little something to eat later that day. And we don't want visitors to go through that. We don't want them to struggle with or to fight with the idea of extra added costs once you come to Alaska. So in 2006, we adopted an all-inclusive approach to our meals, to our attractions and activities to make sure that once you get to this destination, you're not going to be asked to purchase other tours to enhance your Alaska experience. Now, there are some things that aren't built into all of our tours, flight scene being one of them. Some people want to take a flight around Denali National Park. I would love for everybody to do that and go see that mountain up close, because that will really put in perspective how little we are in this great big world. But you know, it's something that would be an option to you. We're not going to push that. But with the other attractions and activities, like I highlighted in the earlier slides, those are all part of the program, as are the taxes and the transfers and the gratuities for the cruise line industry, the gratuities for your flight scene operator or your riverboat captain for the day. Whoever those people that are taking care of us, those are handled as well. All of your luggage handling is taken care of. But probably the biggest thing, like I say, is the meals. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner on a daily basis. And for years I've said we don't like buffets. Well, obviously in the time of COVID, that's changing ever more. Buffets are likely gone for quite some time, but that's all right for us, because we've always felt like buffets were an easy out for operators or a restaurant. You know, if you feed 100 people salmon and prime rib, they're probably going to be okay with it. But if you've seen salmon and prime rib for 6 or 7 days in a row, that gets a little bit old. And we want you to enjoy the resources that Alaska has. Enjoy the black scallops from Kodiak, or the halibut, or the fresh king salmon out of the Copper River Valley. If you're not a fish lover, of course, there's always things like steaks and homemade meatloaf. And if you're, of course, worried about dietary restrictions or gluten-free, there's certainly always options available for you there as well. And that's something that our team in Lake City, in Lake City, Minnesota, our home office, during the reservation process, and really throughout the communication that takes place up into your departure, that's something that we're going to be asking about is, do you have any restrictions in terms of mobility, so that we can make sure you're in the right hotel room? Do you have any restrictions in terms of food, so we can make sure you have the right options available to you? I told you how great our partners are in Alaska, and we've honestly had partners who are 100 miles away from the closest grocery store, and they will make a specific trip to the grocery store, or on their next trip, which they do probably once a month, they'll pick up things like almond milk for our clients. So it's really awesome the way that they help support us, and the way that we're, of course, supporting you in your adventures. With these dinner programs especially, something we've adopted years ago now, and it's really taking hold, and I think you're going to see more and more of this. It's more of a voucher style dining. You go down to the restaurant. Sometimes you have 3 or 4 restaurants to choose from in a community like Talkeetna. You can eat at the Lodge. You can go downtown and eat at the Roadhouse, which is a historic landmark. Or you can go to the brewery across the street and have a burger and French fries. But we want you to have that freedom and that flexibility, as if you're an independent traveler, but you're in that safety and security of a small group, so that if there are questions or concerns, you have somebody that you can lean on. And of course, we'll take care of making sure you get reservations and tables at the appropriate time when it comes to these meals. One of our favorite destinations in terms of dining is Park 229. This is our 229 Parks. This is in Denali National Park. This is a chef-owned and operated restaurant. Chef Laura Cole, who's been nominated for multiple James Beard Awards. Recently, she was featured on the Food Network, or on the Top Chef, Bravo Network Top Chef series. And when I called her years ago, when I first learned about 229, I would say it was probably 10 or 12 years ago now. I called her and I said, Laura, I'm really interested in incorporating your operation into our tours that are visiting Denali National Park on a select number of tours. What do you say? And she said, I'm not interested. She said, I can't work with companies like Princess and Holland America. They don't understand who I am. I said, okay. I said, we're not them, but that's just fine. I understand you're in high demand anyway, so openings are pretty far and few between. So we said our goodbyes and well wishes, and I think it was maybe 48 hours later, she called me back and she said, I want to apologize. I want to say I'm sorry for lumping you in with the big cruise companies, and that meant a lot to me. She took the time to go on our website and to learn more about who we were and the philosophy and again, the experience that we were trying to offer visitors who are coming to Alaska. And so that forward, that was probably 2007. From that day forward, she has opened her restaurant specifically to our groups on Monday nights when she is generally closed to the public. And the homemade breads, the homemade desserts are fabulous. That's where she's won her awards when it's come to the James Beard and the nominations there. But also the use of fresh Alaskan produce that they grow in their gardens, and the features like the bison steaks that come out of the Matanuska River Valley, or the fresh salmon or halibut that's caught in Prince William Sound only hours prior to making it to her restaurant. This is a pretty special destination and a pretty special opportunity. And again, I think it wouldn't be available to us if we didn't have the mindset that certainly in Alaska, as big as Alaska is, smaller is certainly better. And with all these dinners, you want to make sure that you have something to wash that salmon and halibut down with, whether it's a glass of wine or whether you'd like a gin and tonic or a glass of beer from one of the local breweries. That's, again, just part of that value-added approach that we love to incorporate and offer to you with each of those dinners. Like I said, I really encourage you to spend time on our website, and if you haven't already, ordered that 2021 Alaska brochure. You'll find in there that we've got 7 summertime and we call summer and fall tours. These are land tours that are oftentimes incorporated with a cruise. Some of them are just land only. You'll learn more about the cruise lines, our partnerships with Celebrity and Royal Caribbean and Norwegian Cruise Lines on the website as well. There's specific pages set aside for those in both the brochure and the website, those particular cruise lines. But one thing I always, again, want to go back to and reiterate is that we are an Alaska land tour operator first. And so any one of these itineraries that you see listed here on our signature series, the Untamed Alaska, the Denali Explorer, the Grand Slam, and our newest pretty awesome and exciting itinerary is the Fish and Float. These can all be land-only itineraries. If you've done the cruise in Southeast Alaska, or you're hesitant to get on cruise ships, you don't have to worry. You can still have that glacial experience by the small boat true tours that we run in places like Prince William Sound and Kenai Fjords. And then you get that awesome land tour where you get, I think, a bit more of an authentic Alaska. Our adventure series are a little bit more demanding. These are where you're going to get in small planes and fly to remote parts of the state. You're going to walk on the beaches with the bears, for example, on the Three Bears of Alaska, where you're going to walk through the historic mill at the Kennecott Copper Mines on the National Park Tour. So these do require a little bit more in terms of mobility. And these are the tours, I would say, between the adventure series and our winter tours. These are the ones that when we sat down as a family and looked at the future of John Hall's Alaska this past summer, we knew we could operate at a level of 24 because we've been doing so with trips like our adventure series and our winter wonders for years. So it was an easy transition for us, and I think the encounter and the experience is going to be tenfold for those that are traveling on these select tours during the summer months. One thing I will say, there were about, I think, 80% of our clients, maybe even higher, 85% of our clients that were scheduled to travel with us in 2020. They rolled their trips over to 2021. So I do encourage you to, again, spend time on the website. Lauren will update this quite often, and she's not going to send a banner across your screen that says, book now, only 2 spots remaining. That's not certainly the approach that we want to when it comes to travel. But here we are October 1st, and I would say that we have, with the smaller number of groups that we're running, the numbers in the groups that we're running for 2021, we're pretty lean on our availability for this time of the year. And I would say by Christmas and the first of the year, it's going to be pretty well booked for 2021, which it's great for us, and we're excited to get back into operating these Alaska programs. The Winter Wonders, the adventures in the winter wonders, and the Iditarod tour possess a little different look and feel. I talked about this earlier when it comes to visiting Alaska. Believe it or not, even though I live in Texas and I grew up in Minnesota and I thought I was done with winter years ago, March has become one of my favorite times to be in the state of Alaska. Again, Alaska in the winter, small group centric, visiting places like Bettles above the Arctic Circle. We stopped here on our way to or from the checkpoint on the Iditarod tours. I did not think I would have as much fun as I did. This is an absolute hoot, and it's really, really a lot of fun, is curling, and we do this in Fairbanks with the groups. The curling club opens up just privately to our group, and we go in there and spend a couple hours curling. In fact, last time I was there, they had to kick us out because they had a curling club coming in later that afternoon, and we were kind of overstaying our time there, but it's so much fun to curl. And then, of course, probably the biggest highlight for many people is the running of the Iditarod. That great race that runs the first Saturday in March every year, starts in Anchorage, Alaska as the ceremonial start, and then the next day on Sunday, we'll actually go see that on this frozen lake that you see where these people are all standing. I'd call it the longest tailgate in the history of tailgating. Where the race starts here in Willow, there will be families and groups of people that will travel out along this race, and they'll set up shop 30, 40, 50 miles out, almost to the first checkpoint. And they'll have barbecues and celebrate and tailgate and watch these mushers come. Every 2 minutes, they're released out of the gates there in Willow, Alaska, as they make that journey towards Nome. And it's awesome. It really is. It's Alaska's Super Bowl, World Series, World Cup, all wrapped into one. And it's amazing the feel of it, the electric atmosphere of it when you get 100,000 people in the city of Anchorage lining the streets on Saturday, and probably somewhere around 25,000 people out on the ice in Willow to cheer them on Sunday and wish these mushers good fortune and safe travels. For me, and I kind of come full circle here, I mentioned that I'd show you a picture from Talkeetna of Denali National Park, or Denali in the Alaska Range. This picture was taken about 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, truth be told, cameras nowadays certainly pull more color from the aurora than our eyes can see. But I was out on the back deck of the Talkeetna Alaskan Lodge with about a dozen of our travelers. This was, again, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And with our naked eyes, we could see the Alaska Range, and that's Denali right in the center, 20,000 feet high, 80 miles away in the dark of night with the aurora dancing in the background. It just created this awesome religious-like experience that really is unmatched in terms of natural occurrences that I think you can find. And I know some of you have seen the aurora in places like Montana and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa, but these pillars and these curtains that dance across the sky in Alaska in March is really the ideal time to see that. It's just breathtaking, and words truly can't describe how awesome that encounter can be. I did mention that, of course, we have a lot of cruising options in Southeast Alaska, but I would say as a family and as an organization, and really even from the words of our travelers that have participated in these small boat opportunities over the last half dozen years, a lot of our love for Southeast Alaska has been reignited. And it's been reignited because of the opportunity to spend time on vessels like this, these small overnight vessels, which we have with a select number of our itineraries during the summer. You can choose to add a small boat cruise if it's something you're interested in. And these small boat cruises are unique because, again, you have your own private cabin on board. You can see the doors lead out to the wraparound deck. If you want to go swimming, well, they don't have a swimming pool, but you're certainly welcome to take a dive in the icy waters of Southeast Alaska. There's no casinos, there's no show lounges, so it's a lot different than the cruise experience that most of the globe has, or most of the people who come to Alaska every summer have. But it's a focus on culture and wildlife and history, and it's the first time that we, as a family, have felt that there is a comparable partner in Southeast Alaska who has a vision and a philosophy that matches that of what we're doing in interior Alaska. And certainly it's not a cheap investment, but it's really a worthwhile look and consideration for those that have done Alaska before and you're thinking about coming back. I would highly recommend that you look at these small boat cruises. Or again, if the idea of big ships is just not sexy to you, maybe these small ships are the way to see Alaska's inside passage. And the great thing about these small ships is they never leave the inside passage. You're probably going to feel more in terms of tidal shifts than you will of the waves, the motion of the ocean, because we're not forced to go into the Gulf of Alaska and out into the Pacific. So these small ships highlight places like Wrangell and Petersburg and Sitka and Cake, and of course the native villages, and the focus becomes again more Alaska centric and less in time with ports where we've got jewelry stores and t-shirt shops. Again, since we're the only group on board, we charter that vessel. I think a much more conscious environment. We know who's on board with us. We've been traveling together. We're all healthy. We're all safe, and we're in the carrying arms of hands of a select number of onboard captains and crew. And with these small boat adventures, something that I want to point out, I mentioned that they certainly come at a bit more of an investment, but unlike large ship cruising, the small ship advantage is that all of your activities and attractions are included, much like, again, the structure of our land tours. You're not sold optional whale viewing tours or bear viewing tours or salmon fishing trips in these different ports of call. The activities that we do every day are just, that's part of our nature, part of what we're doing. Whether it's viewing the glaciers or chasing the wildlife on the Dib here, the humpbacks, that's something that just becomes an everyday occurrence on small ship lifestyle. Another small ship experience that's going to be brand new to us in 2021 is a catamaran style approach to Southeast Alaska. And this is something we're really, really ecstatic about. We're hoping that it'll start to gain a little traction because honestly, again, we're one that feels that the cruise ships do a wonderful job in Southeast Alaska, but the reality is they go into a city like Juneau and they spend from 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m., maybe 10 hours, and then they leave. And with these catamaran opportunities, what we are structuring for the future, and we're rolling this out for 2021, is the opportunity to take our guests from the interior of Alaska, fly them to Juneau, Alaska, spend the next 4 nights in Juneau, or 3 nights in Juneau, and then do a night in Sitka, depending on the itinerary, but then take day trips out of Juneau, where you get to go and see the beautiful glaciers like Tracy Arm, which is maybe the most dramatic 26-mile fjord that you can sail through, and get back there and see the Twin Sawyer glaciers. Just fantastic. Or a trip to Glacier Bay National Park, again on a small boat where we can spend time watching the wildlife. We can move a little faster than the cruise ships, and we don't have quite the restrictions. So these day boats really open up Southeast Alaska and a new approach to cruising, where we call it, overnight in the city, so you can spend more time in places like Juneau, and then take your day trips out to see the wilderness, to see the glaciers, to see the coastal lines, the eagle line trees. I think it's going to be a new and fantastic way, and in some ways, certainly a more economical way to see Southeast Alaska and spend more time in Southeast Alaska. And what I think probably the biggest advantage of this is, at the end of the day, you get a chance to really see what real Juneau is like. What's Juneau and Ketchikan and Sitka like after dark? What's Juneau and Ketchikan like after 4 ships with an average of 2,500 passengers has left town? It feels like a ghost town. That timeline from 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock at night changes greatly. And to be able to sit there on the shores of a city or at a lodge like this is the Orca Point Lodge, where we take the guests on both these catamaran trips and the small boat vessel, to sit there and watch the sun go down and sit around the fire and just, again, share those experiences from the day, whether it was the glaciers or the gardens or the whales that we encountered. This is think a big plus to spend more time and do and see Alaska through the lens of what an Alaska sees Alaska through. And then most importantly, at the end of the day, we strive for the happiness, the joy, the stories, the tears, the tears of joy, of course, that where somebody had an encounter that was so great that they're drawn back to do it again and again. And this is the first year for me since, probably sometime in the mid '90s, probably while I was in high school, that I didn't get a chance to go to Alaska this summer, and that certainly that stunk. And I'm looking forward to getting back there because every time it's different. Whether it's the glaciers, the wildlife, just the encounters with our clients and seeing their happy faces. That's something that really excites me, and I'm very much looking forward to being back there in 2021. And I hope that hopefully I'll get a chance to host some of you on some of these tours that we're offering for next year and beyond. Hopefully I didn't talk too much, just about 20 after 11, and I think Lauren told you to plan for an hour and a half, so I did okay. I do again encourage you to keep the questions coming. Lauren is here to answer those. I'm going to bid farewell for now, and maybe I'll get a chance to see you in Alaska in 2021. Certainly looking forward to it. So thank you so much for your time today, and appreciate your interest in Alaska and the idea that smaller is better when it comes to travel. Thank you so much.